Hello Year 11 and welcome to our 8th and last video here for our 6th topic. We're looking at GST and VAT. What do they stand for? GST is Goods and Services Tax. VAT is a Value Added Tax. They're both essentially the same thing. Right? They are a consumption tax. They are a tax that is applied on purchases, on money that you spend. Right? On goods and services, goods are like things, and services is stuff that people do for you, perhaps. Right, so you might pay GST on a pair of shoes that you buy, and if you then go and get your hair cut, you pay GST on the service provided to you by the barber or the hairdresser. Yep. Now, in Australia, GST is 10%, and typically, by law, that has to be included in the advertised price. So usually you don't have to work this out very much, right? Unless it's you that is charging for the goods or services. Perhaps that's much more complicated. Right? Enough to know, though, that GST, 10% GST, has been included in the price of goods and services that you buy. Right? That's already included in the price. Right? That's another tax that you pay. It's a fairly substantial part of the government's tax revenue. Now, goods and services attract GST, but not all of them. There are some exceptions. Now, we might say that education is a service that's provided, right? Now, if you pay school fees, tuition sort of thing, then that's a service, but that does not attract GST. That's been exempted from the GST. Other things that are exempted are things like some food like essentials, basic items like fresh fruit and vegetables and raw meat and that sort of stuff, I think. But processed foods and pre-prepared foods like takeaway, that does attract GST, and it's a little bit hazy in between. Next time you go to the supermarket, have a look at the receipt if you get a chance, and you'll see that some items there attract GST and some don't, probably. Chances are that if you do a fairly large shop at the supermarket, some items will have GST and some won't. There is occasionally debate over what things should and shouldn't attract GST. You might hear every now and again that tampons and pads do attract GST because they're not considered to be essential items. Essential items have been excluded, things like basic food. But on the other hand, things like toilet paper, you could argue, is just as essential and does attract GST. There is a fairly grey area between what is essential and what's not, between what attracts GST and what doesn't. But this is mostly a philosophical or a sort of political question, I suppose, because you don't decide whether or not you pay GST. It's added to the price of things, right, in the advertised price of items that you buy or sell. So, let's have a look here at some examples. Right? As common as GST is, the fact of the matter is that it's not terribly common that you have to do a lot of calculations with it in your everyday life. But let's say I've got a camera and it costs $568 plus GST. We've got to add the GST onto that. Right, so I need to find 10%, right, we're assuming when it says GST that we're in Australia and it's 10%. We need to find 10% of this and add it on. To increase something by 10%, we multiply it by 1.1. So 1.1 times my 568. Thank you, calculator. Here we go. 1.1, right, that's going to increase it by 10%, times 568. Equals 624.80. There we go. Easy as that. Now, slightly more complicated. I've got a TV. It costs $19.95, including GST. Right, that's how we normally see these prices. But what was the price of the TV to the nearest 5 cents before the GST was added? Well, this is not as simple as taking 10% off. That would be a common mistake that is made, right? But you would be taking too much away then. Right here. Right, so don't take 10% off. We're going to do the reverse of what we did before. To add the GST on, we multiplied it by 1.1. To take the GST away, we're going to divide by 1.1. Don't multiply by 0.9, divide by 1.1. Okay, so I have $1,995 divided by 1.1. Right, that's slightly different, but a small amount, to multiplying by 0.9. Thank you, calculator. Here we go. And what do we say? 1995 divided by 1.1, and we get $1,813.65. 1813.65. Good way to check your answer here is now that you've got your answer, check that doing what you did in the previous question, right? Let's increase that by 10%. So if I've got this much and I want to add 10% GST on, I'm adding on $181.37. And that will bring us up to 1995. Rightio? Because we're going to multiply by 1.1. Rightio? That is, as they say, it. Right. GST, VAT, we are all done. Any questions? Jot them down, and I'll see you in class.